Easily one of the most intriguing shows that I previewed for the winter 2023 anime season was The Fire Hunter. This is a series that I absolutely had zero information on, but the moment that I checked out the PV for it, I was sold. What I was seeing was essentially something that looked like it was just out of the 80s or the 90s of anime, an older style to it that really did pop. And yes, as I looked into the director and the series composition writer, I immediately realized, man, this is kind of being made by a bunch of veterans of the industry. The director behind Ranma One Half, the director behind Ghost in the Shell. It was kind of crazy. And now that we finally have the first episode, I can honestly say I am absolutely sold on this show as possibly being the big hidden gem of the season. The one that nobody's going to watch, but it's going to be that special thing that stands out from the crowd as a very unique storytelling. But this is my impressions of the first episode of Fire Hunter, so let's jump right into it. The Fire Hunter opens up in a post-apocalyptic world. We get a sense through the entire episode that mankind was doing well. Yes, they were fighting a lot. We always like to point out the fact that mankind was just warring with each other all the time, but something changed within humankind. A disease of some sort of a change in their bodies to where if they're around any sort of flame or even a spark, it could ignite them into a blaze. And so this kind of forced mankind to kind of have to go into the shadows, hide away from the light. And through the storytelling of this grandmother in this first episode, we get a hint that about 60 years prior, mankind's way of living sort of changed with the arrival of the fire hunters. Individuals skilled enough to go out and kill these monsters and retrieve this resource from them that gives them light without triggering them to go up in a blaze. And their ability to fight them also allowed them to be able to build villages and essentially live. So they kind of revere the fire hunters. The fire hunters have essentially secured their way of life. Well, in the opening segments of this first episode, we get a girl named Toko who's out in the forest and she's being attacked by one of these beasts, and a fire hunter saves her, but at the cost of his life. And in his dying breath, he tells Toko the name of his dog, Kanata, leaving behind to her his dog, his sickle, and his warding stone. We'll cut to the village, and Toko's being taken care of by a different family than her own. It seems like back when she was younger, this natural wind was blowing through the trees and caused a fire, and that fire set both her parents ablaze, leaving her without a family, except for her grandmother. And now this mother of this household is taking care of Toko. And Toko's grandmother mentions the fact that this dog is now healthy again. He's recovered his wounds. And so it's now time for Toko to take the dog, the sickle, and the warding stone back to his people. Again, these are heroes of this world, and so showing respect to his family is very important. And they figure this fire hunter is from the capital because of the warding stone that he has looks like it's factory made. And unfortunately, Toko's the only one that has the ability to do this because the dog won't be with anybody else. The dog bites anybody else but Toko. And so yes, reluctantly, Toko takes up this task. And over the next couple days, you'll see a couple aspects here. One, the fact that the daughter of the mother of this household really hates Toko because, again, she's basically invaded her house. Now she's going to leave her grandmother for her to have to take care of. And I'm certain she's going to come back into the story somehow because she bought a mask right at the end and she's all stupid and angry. But additionally, how much they take serious the idea of Toko making this trip, going so far as to go to the nearby paper maker and having them make the best quality paper possible for her to take back with her. This village is sort of a dying breed in the idea they take serious their worship of the goddess of this world, taking their offerings very seriously. And yes, the finest muku paper is this paper that the gods themselves write upon. Well, despite the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, this world's not the most safest world to be in. The fire hunters are doing a great job, but it's still extremely dangerous to travel in this world. But thankfully, Toko does not have to go alone, as every 6 months, these collection trains come by and supply people with goods while at the same time bringing the offerings that they have back to the capital. And so they sort of arrange her to go with them. But even still, they're like, look, even though you're in these massive train cart things that are highly guarded, doesn't mean it's going to be a safe trip. You could still die. But again, this is kind of Toko's responsibility to return this stuff back to the capital. And that's pretty much all we get from Toko's perspective. She gets in the train, they start taking off from the village, and that's the start of her journey. Another perspective that we get is from this guy named Koshi. And Koshi was living with his mother and his sibling at this kind of factory town. And it seems like he has just recently lost his mother due to the toxins that are actually emitting from the factory that she was working at. And he struggles with this, the idea of how mankind themselves is so weak and so fragile, how they can die so easily. And it sort of wraps up the episode with him receiving a letter from somebody that I think is from some big mansion, so maybe somebody important. But yes, my thoughts on The Fire Hunter. So far, this show is absolutely fantastic. It is presenting the world so beautifully. It's a breathing world. It really does feel like a world that was once bustling. It's lost everything. It was reverted back to this state in which people were just hiding behind trees. That's all they could do to live. And it wasn't until the fire hunters came out and they were able to take down these beasts that they were finally able to sort of start to create civilization again. So you do have that kind of really early setting of mankind, even though they're trying to reclaim the stuff of old technologies. You would assume that if a mere spark can kill somebody, that a lot of the technology that they probably have lost that they're trying to dig up is dangerous. Like, I mean, if you think about it, we're surrounded by things that are creating sparks and electricity. Anything in this room is pretty much going to be able to take me out. So it's kind of interesting, that idea. And again, like I said, it almost feels like mankind has almost taken like a several 100-year step back. It's got its kind of setting that it's setting up that almost feels like it predates a lot of technologies and the revolutions of mankind, like the Industrial Revolution and stuff. And it almost feels like a return to a lot of traditions. Again, like I said, there's a lot of emphasis in this early episode about the idea of Toko not sort of making it look like this town has been defiled, like this village is useless. Because if they send Toko and she doesn't offer a proper offering, at the same time ends up on the streets in this capital, it's going to look bad upon this actual village. So they're going to go out of their way to push each other to sort of present her in the best way possible, to prepare her the best way possible, even though, yes, it obviously seems like based on this village, at least based on the paper maker and based on this daughter of this lady taking care of Toko, they look at Toko as a curse because now technically two bad things has happened around her. The loss of her parents when they all burst up in flames. And yes, technically the loss of this fire hunter, which yes, again, these people revere. These fire hunters are people that are keeping them safe. But it's nice the mother at least sees things differently for Toko. She knows why Toko was in that forest. Everybody else is questioning, why'd you go in the forest? Because you went into the forest, you cost that guy his life. But no, the mother knows why Toko went there. She says that Toko was looking for the tree folk. Tree folk being able to give her medicines that she could use to cure this mother's eyes. But she says that tree folk's medicines doesn't work on us. It's like poison. But she understands what Toko was doing. It wasn't just Toko being an idiot and going out there and getting somebody killed. Toko was trying to help her. So she really does see Toko as almost her own child. And I do appreciate that, despite the fact that everybody else in this village seems to look at her really nasty like. She's a burden upon this village and just reckless and causing death. And again, the whole aspects of like the tree folk and stuff, again, is the lingo and stuff that's kind of creating its own little world. A world that almost, again, it went from being advanced to being almost primitive again, but having traditions kind of re-inject itself. What are the tree folks? Why do they call them tree folks? Is it humans that still live in the forest rather than becoming part of civilization again once they were able to build again? Why are these medicines poisonous to them if they're both human technically? Again, it's only technically been 60 years since the fire hunters came about and allowed them to build villages. So we're not talking about, maybe them evolving in the trees for so long, for centuries, that they can't consume the same things. It'll be curious to kind of see where they end up going with the story because, like I said, based on the PV and stuff like that, they were indicating this idea that Koshi and Toko will eventually meet each other. Like their paths will cross. Obviously, Toko is going to the capital. Maybe that's where Koshi is. It just implies that he's at this place that has a gigantic factory. It almost feels as if the world, and this is kind of one of those interesting things that I really love how they're already kind of fleshing out this world, is that it almost feels like Toko being in a smaller village. This village feels like it's rebuilding itself, but it's still kind of primitive. Whereas over here where Koshi is, where it's got the factory, it's almost as if this is the world where mankind couldn't give up on those niceties that they got. They fought the hardest to reclaim technologies of old because they just can't let it go. And it's sort of implying already some under messages of this story overall, and this idea that obviously mankind was evil, they were always warring each other, and then at some point they got infected by something. Like they're probably going to go in the route of the idea that because of their wars and stuff, it eventually caused some sort of change in their biological selves that made them prone to any sparks or flames to essentially wipe them out. And again, you're going to have, from Koshi's perspective, the people that basically can't give it up, and they rebuild that technology. Whereas again, where Toko's from, they're more about traditions. They're still talking about offerings where other villages gave up. And I think how the two of them are probably going to end up crossing paths is I'm assuming that Koshi's probably going to be from the perspective of trying to find some sort of cure for this illness, because I'm certain that's probably going to be the overall story, is trying to figure out how do we ever get away from what essentially ails us. They've already put things into effect to prevent their own deaths through sparks and flames and found this alternative powering source of light, but even still, Toko lost her parents. Why? Wind blew against trees and it caused a natural fire and they died. They're still not escaping it even though they're staying away from flames. So despite the fact of adapting to the world itself, there's still a necessity to find out how to stop this from happening. The bigger question obviously is going to be what is Toko going to offer to this? What does Toko add to the story? Other than the idea that she was there at the dying breath of a fire hunter, maybe possibly a very renowned fire hunter. Or is there a possibility of her taking up the sickle herself? Becoming a fighter, becoming a fire hunter. It seems as if the dog really trusts her. I don't see why when Toko arrives the capital, suddenly she's gonna say, sit dog, you're fine now. This dog does not want to be with anybody else but Toko. But yeah, story aside though, visually it looks absolutely fantastic. Like I said at the very beginning, it really does give me a feel of like a 80s or 90s anime. It's got a very older style to it, an older filter to it, and just the overall, the character designs themselves, which I find to be really, really beautiful looking. This is obviously a style for me personally that I honestly miss. I love new stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a snooty. I need the older style stuff. I just appreciate it whenever it does come around as, yes, a style that I do miss, that I am nostalgic for. But I will admit there was a few missed points in this episode where it just felt kind of a little bit off with the animation. Or yes, sadly using a still shot when he first attacks this fire fiend thing. It just was like, did we have to use a still on that? And like an artsy looking still, it almost felt like they just like, crap, we didn't get this cut, so let's just stick a still right here. Because it didn't even look like a finished still. But I mean, besides that one still that just kind of bugged me. The rest of it looks really gorgeous. Like I said, I love the style. And I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Just really beautiful. And I cannot wait to see more. I will admit, I think besides the still, I think the only other miss that this episode had was, I think the beginning segment was kind of jarring how they portrayed it. Because the opening segment really has, Toko was saved by this guy. He falls over and says that my dog's Kanata. And then it cuts to her having offerings, and then it cuts back to saying what happened after it died. Like, so it's like, here's what happened. Okay, let's move on. Oh yeah, here's what happened again. Okay, then let's move on. It just kind of jumped back and forth, and I just kind of felt that was a miss. But other than that, I mean, just putting aside like that opening segment, which still, yeah, like I said, a lot of the animation there looked beautiful. It was just a really fantastic episode. Like I said, just managing to, it's not just kind of visually showing a new world, a post-apocalyptic world that's kind of rebuilding itself and very primitive, but additionally with just the lingo and the dialogue and the conversations they have that really does make it feel real. It really brings the world to life, shows the world is rebuilding and has a lot of traditions that are kind of reinfusing into it. So it has me really, really excited where this series goes from here. I cannot wait for more. I think the other kind of misgiving I have is I'm not too sure if I'm a fan of Misaki Kuno being Toko. I love Misaki Kuno. I think her voice is absolutely adorable, and I love her voice in a lot of shows, but she's also kind of, she's very anime-esque. She's a very anime voice. She's a very cutesy anime voice, and so with this show being so kind of grounded in almost a very realized world, the moment that she opened her mouth, I'm like, I don't think that matches her. Like, she's got a cutesy voice, but I don't think it matches this girl. Like, I don't think it matches her age. Technically, Misaki Kuno is more for like, her voice is very perfect for like very, very, very young characters. And we're talking like 3 or 4 year old, not this girl. So it was a little off-putting the moment that she opened her mouth. I'm like, I don't know if she matches her at all. But I don't know, I'll probably get used to it. And like I said, I technically really do love her seiyuu. But anyways, looking forward to more. Absolutely loving it so far. The Fire Hunter. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below. Comment. Let me know what you thought of the episode if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button so you got my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. We also have a membership button down there where you can join and support the channel. I greatly appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.